Chapter 21. 100 years ago. Third person's POV. It was the time of war. Death and destruction was everywhere. The ignorant humans had just learnt that they weren't the only superior race on this planet. Were they superior at all? As soon as they felt threat to their throne, they attacked. Yes, humans were the first to attack, which caused death of hundreds of innocent werewolves. Some were experimented on, while the others were tortured. The werewolves knew what they could do to the humans and had decided to stand back until the lives of their kind was threatened. Their primal instinct to protect their families and pack led to the largest, longest, and the most destructive war that would be recorded in the histories of both of the species. Mothers lost their children, sisters lost their brothers, wives lost their husbands, and children lost their fathers. The prolonged war finally came to an end. The four heroes of war seemed like a curse to the mankind. They had killed plenty and without mercy. Every human who came in their way was slaughtered. But blaming it on them would be hypocritical. After all, it was the humans who started the war with an inevitable end. It was the turn of the werewolves to reign over the earth. Esme had everything that she could have hoped for. A husband, a son, and a beautiful future. At a young age, she had mastered the art of witchcraft, a skill that was usually frowned upon. But with her beautiful smile and a few magical tricks, she had won many hearts. Then came the war. All the human men were recruited in the army. Both Esme's husband and son had to leave her, but not before promising her that they'll be back very soon. They did keep their promise. They did return, but in coffins. Saying that she was devastated would be an understatement. Their images kept flashing in her mind. She thought that she was going insane. Little did she know that she indeed was. She blamed the werewolves, she blamed them all. Especially those whose songs were being sung everywhere she went. She had heard their name. Elias, Theodore, Romanique, and Damien. Oh, how much she wished to curse them all. And indeed she would. She was powerful, and she knew it. She didn't even need them to be near her to curse them. But she wanted them to know. She wanted them to remember who she was until their last breath. Her city was being named after his wolf lion, and for that they were coming to the city. It would be the perfect time. She would crash into the ball that was being organized that night and curse them in front of every one of those damned werewolves. She would show them that they weren't as powerful as they thought they would be. She did exactly that. When she cursed them, they didn't even try to resist. She couldn't see the anguish in their eyes, their apologetic faces, their hanging heads, for her eyes were covered with fury. Years passed. She couldn't help but think that the curse that she had given them was more of a gift. Who wouldn't want to be immortal? Their immortality would remain until Elias found his mate. Of course, Theodore, Romanique, and Damien would never find one, but they would have the gift of immortality until then. You have to sacrifice a few things to get something, don't you? And after Elias found her mate, then what? They would all get a happy ending without even an ounce of guilt towards the amount of deaths they had caused. She couldn't let that happen. She sacrificed hundreds of werewolves to limit her aging process and hid her deteriorating self behind her magic. She then looked for the werewolf who would possess the seed of Elias's mate. With her power, she found him soon enough. He still hadn't found her mate, and she saw it as a perfect chance. She compelled him into thinking that he was her mate. When his real mate confronted him, she made him kill her and continued with the attempts of having his child. Mastering that trick took her a few failures, but she did succeed. She cast her magic off the man who later on killed himself, realizing that he had murdered his own mate. After the baby was born, she left it in the woods, knowing all too well that the two werewolves who weren't able to have a child would take her in. She wondered if they ever knew who took away that ability from them. While Amara grew up, she gathered her army, collecting humans from all parts of the world who were ready to throw off the werewolves. With a little motivation and magic, they all easily gave in. But of course she needed some werewolves by her side as well. After all, who would know them better than their own kind? So she decided to cast her magic over a few of them. Emily didn't even require magic. She was already very ready to betray her own kind and wanted Elias in return. Esme promised she could have Elias. But she left out the part that she would get her, but as a corpse. Then there 𝐊𝐤. It had been very hard for her to cast her spell on him. She did it the day that had gone out when their house had been burnt. His wolf had resisted a lot, and the spell had almost drained her. But she was successful. All her plans were working out well, and if she was lucky, Elias would be dead within a week, while the humans and werewolves would be against each other in another war. A war which humans would win. And after all of that, she would be able to die in peace. She knew that she wouldn't be welcomed in heaven, but hoped to see her husband and son with open arms when she entered the spirit realm. Theo, and that's all we have for today's trip to the past. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time. Amara, who are you even talking to? Theo, they know. They all know. Chapter 22. 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐬 POV. When Amara didn't meet us back at the decided spot, we knew something had happened. I had a really bad feeling about it. The feeling turned out to be true when we headed to the direction where she had gone and learnt that a young female had been kidnapped by a gang. I could make out that their leader was Theo when one of the men gave us his description. It had been 3 days since her disappearance, and Lion was very agitated. He wanted us to save her as soon as possible, knowing that she was in grave danger. I wanted to as well, but Amara and I had talked about this situation before. When Theo had told her about his leader not wanting her quite yet, we knew they would come for her sooner or later. She had made me promise that I would not look for her until I made sure that the revolt was handled, and that is what I planned to do. Amara's mother knew someone back in Kronos who could help her retrieve the materials required for her to perform a magic to locate where Amara was, and so she had left instantly. Stopping a revolt sounded absurd, and I didn't have any idea of how to do it. I sent Rome to Petra in order to alert the adults about the possibility of the war and to ask them to prepare armies only to fight those who were causing the revolts in order to decrease the possible victim. I thought their old minds were wise enough that we couldn't afford another war between the two species. Every city had speakers in their roads so that elders could announce the important news. It was usually announced from Ephesus, since it was a holy city. We knew where the transmission tower was, and so Damien and I headed for it. We were aware that we would be allowed in there, and if we weren't, we would find our way in it ourselves. On reaching there, the wolves who were responsible for securing the area tried to stop us. We didn't have time for their bullshit, so we knocked all of them out and emptied the transmission tower, only letting the operator stay in there with us. Maybe not letting, forcing. As soon as he was done setting everything up, he let me know that it was time for me to speak in the microphone. Initially, I was dumbfounded. I had no idea how to start and what to say. But then I started. I know all of you must be wondering why this announcement is being made. Before coming to that, I would like to introduce myself. I am 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐬. To some of you, I might be a hero, while to some of you, I might be the person you despise the most. I am not here to justify myself as either of those. Right now, I am here to do something that I wasn't able to do 100 years ago. I am here to prevent a war. A war that has been brewing since a few decades ago. It isn't a war between humans and werewolves. It is a war between those who want to create a barrier between the two species and those who want peace. I know that right now there isn't exactly peace between our species, but if this war does happen, it won't ever be possible. To all my fellow werewolves, we are also humans in many ways. To all my fellow humans, humans also have an animalistic side to them. We aren't all so different. The difference between us has been created by our own people, and I would like to request you all to look beyond it. I would like to request you to not participate in this revolt. Things won't get better for either of us in this way. If the rebels do come in your city, I would like to request both humans and werewolves to join hands, because our goal is all the same. We all want to protect our loved ones. I want to protect my loved one. That's all that I have to say. It is all up to you now. I nodded to the operator and he turned off the microphone. I knew that only the speech wouldn't prevent the war. I had to protect the people as well. I had to wait for 2 more days before the revolt in Ephesus would take place. I just wished to tell Amara to hold on just a little more. I would come for her soon. Amara's POV. I just lied there looking at the ceiling. I don't know how many hours it had been since my encounter with Theo, as I had fallen unconscious after that. I hoped that 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐬 was keeping his promise and doing his best to prevent the revolt. I knew he was. I trusted him. Then my mind wandered off to Theo. What made Theo change so suddenly? 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐧 had known him for more than 100 years. One can't just betray 100 years of trust. There had to be something wrong with him. Someone was definitely manipulating him. It had to be magic. How else could someone get into his mind? My thoughts were interrupted when I saw the guard suddenly standing up and saluting whoever was coming towards my cell. I tensed up when he started to approach the cell door and fumbled with his keys to open the lock. A person wearing a cloak entered the cell, their face completely covered with the hood. 𝐊𝐤 entered the cell along with another guard. They both held me up from either of my arms so that I was sitting on my knees while facing the person. The person spoke, their voice seemingly disguised. "It is a pleasure to finally meet you." I couldn't help but let out a chuckle, causing 𝐊𝐤 and the guard to look down at me with surprise. "You don't have to pretend with me." The person in the hood took a step back in surprise. I have known for a long time I didn't let my smirk falter as the person took their hood down. "It's nice to finally see the real you, mother." "It really is, isn't it? Now it's time for a real mother-daughter talk," she spoke, smirking right back at me. "𝐊𝐤, does everyone know everything except for me? WTF, I even part of this story?" I offended. "Author, calm down, it's not a big deal. Didn't you have something important to say?" "𝐊𝐤, Rome and Damien, oh yes, Happy New Year, our beloved mates." Chapter 23. How are you doing today? I hope your day went well. Amara's POV. Yes, what do you want to talk about? When I got my first period, or do you want to give me some 𝐻𝐥𝐻𝐬? I scowled at her. How about we discuss on my plan to kill your mate? I am sure you have some suggestions, she spat back. I do have a suggestion. It's called fuck off, I replied, struggling to be free from 𝐊𝐤 and the guard's hold so that I could let my hands and her face meet. She chuckled, looking at me. You truly look pitiful, daughter. But honestly, I don't have time to talk bull's tea with you. She walked towards me and grabbed my hair, pulling it back so that I met her eyes. I only brought you in this world for a reason, and you will help me accomplish it. Is it to make you regret birthing me? Because trust me, I'll accomplish it. I looked at her furiously. Look, BH, I'll ask you questions and you'll answer. Got it. She tightened her hold on my hair and brought her other hand near my neck. She traced Elias's mark and whispered some words. As soon as she did that, the mark and its surroundings started burning, causing me to groan in pain. I knew Elias could feel it as well. She was trying to bait him. Don't fall for it, I thought, hoping that he could somehow hear my pleading. I had to distract her somehow. I am going to let it hurt for as long as you're here, then I'll relieve you of it, because a dead person can't probably feel pain. Can they, Amara? She brought her hand up to my chin. Now all you have to do is answer me honestly. If you don't, I know how to make it hurt even more. My precious daughter, she said, ending her sentence with words laced with pure sarcasm. I nodded. Ma. How did you know that it was me behind it? She questioned. Well, the magic spells you were teaching me weren't approved by a friend. She let me know that those were meant to drain my spiritual energy, and it led me to wonder, why would my own mother, who appears to love me so much, want to drain me off of my energy? It isn't what mothers usually do. You know. Oh wait, of course you don't, I replied, earning an increase in the pain over my mark, causing me to shut my eyes to prevent the tears from coming out. I know exactly what mothers do. I could see that she was shaking with anger. Does Elias know that it is me? Why don't you ask him? My voice was becoming raspy and tired. Love, I won't have time to be asking him questions. I would rather enjoy slowly killing him, she answered in a sing-song manner. I'll be honest here, Amara. I have nothing against you. I don't want innocent people like yourself to struggle. Just join me. I won't let any harm come to you. And when all of this is over, you can join me on my trip to the afterlife. We can all be a family. I know Robert and Jake would accept you. They would be thankful to you for avenging them. You think your loved ones would be happy seeing you become the monster you have become. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I don't think so. Have you any idea how many innocent lives you've already taken? The revolts that you started have killed and destroyed lives of several families. You think your family would be grateful to you after seeing that? And about the part of being a family, I want to have nothing to do with you. My parents are dead. You killed them, I growled. I knew my words had angered her greatly, so much for trying to distract her, Amara. I thought to myself. She released her hold on me and stepped back, her eyes completely cold and devoid of all emotions except for one, hatred. She murmured a few words. I felt as if someone was cutting into different parts of my body. When I looked down at my stomach, where it hurt the most, I could see blood gushing out of me. It all hurt so badly that I couldn't even scream. Don't worry, I won't kill you yet. I'll heal you and do it all over again, she spoke before exiting the cell. I had no strength to reply. I don't know how long I lay there, feeling the pain and the metallic smell of my blood around me. I knew that my wolf couldn't heal me here. Heck, I couldn't even feel her in my mind. I started coughing out blood. Smelling the blood was one thing, tasting it was another. It made me want to puke. I tried to ask the guards for some water, but they let out a laugh after hearing me. I'll kill you first, I thought to myself as they laughed at my misery. Just then someone came. I could tell because the guards tensed up. You guys can go catch a break, the tone of the voice letting them know that he was certainly not requesting them. 𝐀𝐿. The guards bowed to him and left. On hearing them leave, he appeared in front of my cell door, but he was facing the other way, towards the cell opposite to me. You are still alive, he commented, the words obviously being directed to me. Yeah, no thanks to you, I barely managed to reply. My eyes had started blurring. Definitely no thanks to me. How are you holding up, he asked, putting his hands in his pocket. I've been better. But may I ask, why are I stopped speaking because of the sudden increase in the pain? Why are you so interested in your enemy's well-being? I don't think your boss will be happy. My enemy is the same as you, Amara, he replied, causing my eyes to widen a little in surprise. Forgive this idiot's inability to overpower magic. He then turned. Even with the blurriness in my eyes, I couldn't miss the color of his eyes. Black. 𝐸𝐴ZEKIEL, I whispered. 𝐀𝐿, I'm not an idiot. Amara, I don't know, I kinda agree with 𝐸𝐴ZEKIEL. 𝐀𝐿, you're just jealous because I'm hotter than you. Chapter 24. Quickly updates before Wattpad can start with the upgrade. On the day when Amara had just started learning magic from her mother. Amara's POV. I'll be honest, I was happy to meet my biological mother. After the death of my parents, even though I had Elias, Rome, Damien, and 𝐀𝐿, I felt like I didn't have any family that I knew or was related to in this world. At least not one that I had known of. And when she told me that she would teach me how to control and use my magic, oh, how ecstatic I was. After practice for the day was over and my mother had gone to go shop for a few necessities, I had decided to give Kiara a call, just to update her on the situation. I wasn't expecting to learn what I did from the call at all, and I was certainly very shocked to. Hey Kiara, have you been well, I asked, a smile appearing on my face. Yes, love, I've been well. How about you? How are things going over there, she replied. I'm good. We managed to calm down the revolt before any major damage could occur. I also found my mother. That's wonderful, Amara, she exclaimed. It is. She has also started teaching me some magic, I informed her. Oh, really? What was the first spell that you learned, she questioned. She said to start with the basic, so the first one she taught me was 𝐻𝐸, as I replied. She taught you that word for freeze, she asked. Yes, she did. I wondered what was wrong with it. Why? It's just that ..in magic, there are intensities in words. Different words can have the same meaning but different intensities. More the intensity, more of your spiritual power will be drained. For a word as simple as freeze, I can't help but wonder why she would teach you that word. A simple pagoma would suffice, she explained. Huh, I thought to myself. At first I assumed that since my mother seemed to be a powerful witch, she must have forgotten that I'm an amateur and would probably correct herself next time. But after a few classes and calls with Kiara, I learned that this woman was determined to drain me off of my spiritual power. I could only wonder why my own mother wanted to do that. Not. The night before the group left for Ephesus. Amara's POV. I hadn't told Elias about my discoveries. I couldn't. Not yet. I was sitting in my room, lost in my thoughts, when I heard someone knock on the door. And why have you honored me with the pleasure of your company, Lord Elias, I teased. I knew it was time for our walk. My lady, he bowed. I was wondering if you'd like to take a walk with me. This late at night, I faked my gasp. I don't think I can go anywhere with you at this time. What would the people think? Laughing, he took my hand in his and led us out of the house. We walked to the clearing of the forest where I used to practice my magic. 𝐿𝐤𝐵 sat down in the grass next to the lake. I looked at him and raised my eyebrow. He patted the spot next to him. Smiling, I sat down as well, resting the weight of my back on my arms and looking up at the starry sky. 𝐿𝐤𝐵 gazed at me and then up at the sky. Look, that group of stars is called Cassiopeia, he pointed with his hand. I laughed. I think you mean that when I reached out for his arm and guided it towards the left. Oh, he looked slightly embarrassed, which made me laugh even more. Grabbing my hand, which was holding his arm, he pulled me towards him, halting my laughter. There are many stars shining brightly in the sky tonight. Can you tell which one is shining the most brightly for me, my love? His eyes looking into mine, my reflection on them as clear as that on the water of the lake. The northern star, I managed to reply somehow. He chuckled. I think you know which one I was talking about. He brought my hand to his lips, laying a kiss on my fingers, all while looking into my eyes. I gulped, causing his gaze to flutter from my eyes to my neck and then up to my lips. The way his gaze was piercing through me, I couldn't help but part my lips, trying to breathe in through my mouth because clearly my nose wasn't letting in any oxygen. He leaned in, my hand still in his, while the other one coming up to hold the side of my face. It felt like forever until his lips were brushing against mine. His lips reached out for mine. This kiss was different from the last time. Last time it was out of desperation, my and his own desperation, for us to know that we hadn't lost each other. It had been fierce and aggressive. This time it was slow, delicate, but not at all devoid of emotions. In fact, for me, this kiss had more emotions than the last one. The way his thumb gently caressed my cheek, the way his other hand was wrapped around mine tightly as we deepened the kiss. I could feel his emotions through it and could only hope that I had succeeded in delivering at least half of them. When he pulled out of the kiss, I was out of breath. Even though I was sitting down, my legs had become weak. My whole body was on fire. Just a touch and a kiss from him had that effect on me. I looked up at him. He smiled down at me and then kissed my forehead, but not before whispering, "Truly beautiful." After a walk like that, I thought I would get the best sleep of my life. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Why? It was because he appeared in my dream. Who? You might wonder. The one and only capable of doing so, probably not. The moon god. "Oh, hello there, Amara. I almost didn't see you," he spoke before sipping some tea. He was sitting on a sofa in a patio at God knows where. And get it? God knows where? And he's God? Okay, bye. Moon god, I have returned for an appearance. You all may bow down to me. Theo crickets. Chapter 25. Continuation of Amara's dream. Amara's POV. "What are you doing here?" I asked while walking towards the god. "Well, you see, last time when we were having a talk, we got interrupted. So I thought to myself, where can I meet Amara without anyone eavesdropping? In her dreams, duh," he said. "Genius, I know." So I said, obviously asking him to continue. So what he replied, tilting his head. "Why are you here?" I was honestly wondering who assigned him as a god. "Ah, yes, I noticed that you've realized who is behind all of this mess." He motioned for me to sit beside him. "And I was assigned as a god because of my promising personality and abilities." I had my doubts, but you just confirmed them, I replied while ignoring his last comment. "When you said that we had a traitor amongst us, I thought that you were talking about Theo." He threw his head back and laughed. No, Theo wouldn't do something like that, at least not in right mind. But you have that figured out as well, haven't you?" Indeed, I snapped my head towards him, causing him to raise an eyebrow and look at me with curiosity. "Why have you only been giving us information that we know? It's kinda f.....uh.𝐷. How do I put it? Useless, you know." He smiled. "I told you, I don't meddle with fate." He laid back on the couch and looked up at the sky. "Amara, I declare you as my friend." "And why have you bestowed such an honor upon me?" I asked, half laughing, and copied his actions. "My imagination wasn't that bad. I mean, the sky looked pretty real to me." He turned his head towards me. "As a friend, you can ask me for a favor." I knew that he was implying something here, just not what. What kind of favor could I ask him for? "Can I ask you for information?" I questioned. "Nope," he said, looking back into the sky. "Favor, my ass," I replied. He chuckled. "Think better. Can I ask you to keep something for me? Protected and safe. But you have to deliver it to me when the time comes," I asked, still looking at the sky, wondering if this also somehow meant meddling with fate. "Of course you can," he replied, a full smile appearing his face. Never mind, he was always smiling. But I could tell that I had asked for just what he wanted me to, which made me smile as well. Back to the present. Elias's POV. It was the day of the revolt, and things looked awfully quiet. Probably the calm before the storm, as people say. Damien, some other werewolves and humans who had willingly volunteered, and I were patrolling the streets. People hadn't dared to come out of their houses, and it was something I was glad for. It would be easier for us to fight the revolters without the people outside. I patrolling a street when somebody pulled my shirt, causing me to turn. It was a little girl who was offering me a cookie. "Mommy said that you were here to protect us from the bad guys. I thought you would need some energy to fight them," she said shyly, pushing her hands forward. I smiled and ruffled her hair with one of my hands while taking the cookie from the other. Taking a bite, I replied to her. "Thank you, love. After eating a delicious cookie as this, I don't think the enemies stand a chance against us." She giggled while I frowned. It wasn't her giggle that made me frown. I could smell humans and werewolves making their way down the street. "Could you do me a favor?" I asked her, and she nodded. "Run back into your house and ask your mom to lock the doors and windows." "Okay," she obeyed, running back into her house as fast as she could. By the time she was in, I could see them all. It seemed as if there were around 50 here. I could only wonder how many were there in the whole city. The other 2 wolves with me had already shifted. Letting Lion take over, I shifted into a black wolf. My size and scars were enough to tell that I wasn't to be messed enough. Baring my teeth towards them, I took a step back through my hind legs, ready to attack. Observing their weapons, I could tell that they hadn't only brought knives, swords, and arrows with them. They had guns this time. This would be a challenge. Just then I felt a hand pet the fur on my back. "Don't worry about the guns," Kiara's voice spoke. "I'll protect you all from them." Giving her a wolf's smile, I turned back towards the revolters and ran towards them, and so did they. The first one, I pushed with my head, and he immediately fell down. I turned to grab the other by his neck and pulled out his life force from him. My other 2 partners had joined me by then. Not all the revolters were fighting us. Some were busy taking people out of their houses forcefully. I could see one pulling a boy away from his parents. They kept yelling that they weren't werewolves. If only they knew that these people didn't give 2 shits about that. Before the guy could drive the knife through the kid's chest, I pulled his head off from him. I didn't have time to stay for the parents' thank yous and turned back to save other lives. At one point I was completely surrounded. There were 10 of them around me. One made his way towards me, causing me to leap at him and decapitate his body. The others took this opportunity, and one of them drove a knife through my right foreleg, which made me howl in pain. The other to my left did the same, causing the strength in the 2 limbs to give up, but I knew I couldn't. Not before saving Amara. While the 2 kept their knives driven through my legs, one of them moved to stab me in the chest. But before he could, he was stabbed himself and stood behind him, the father of the boy who I had saved. He nodded at me, and I immediately moved to grab the guy at my left and lifted him to hit the guy at my right. I could feel my wounds being healed even faster than a normal wolf's, and I knew I had to thank Kiara for that. Now that I was able to stand up properly and observe my surroundings, I could tell that more humans and werewolves had joined the fight. Not to fight each other, but to fight those who wanted to disrupt the peace. It only made me even more determined to win. Just as more people had joined to help us, more had joined from the enemy side as well. But a sniff in the air was enough to tell me that they had no chance. Rome had been successful. The reinforcements were here. We had won this fight. But the war was yet to begun. 𝐊𝐢𝐵, those last lines. I can literally feel the author smiling while writing them. Author, while smirking, I bet you can. Chapter 26. Whoop. Chapter dedicated to 𝐊𝐢𝐭 870. So only a few chapters of Lion are left. We are coming to an end soon, kids. Fun fact, I sometimes read Lion in my free time to laugh and cringe at my own jokes. Amara's POV. I know that you're badly injured, Amara, but now is not the time to lose consciousness, Ezekiel said while stepping into the cell. Coughing, I replied, just get me out of here and my wolf and magic will heal 𝐊𝐢𝐬. I suspected so. Your magic is only blocked inside the cell. I recommend you to start healing yourself as soon as we step out. Also, contacting Elias now would be a good idea. He lifted me up, causing me to groan in pain and him to wince slightly. Sorry. It's all right. As soon as he stepped out, I worked on healing myself. I wasn't able to heal myself completely, but I concentrated on the injuries which looked more serious. I don't think you can just carry the prisoner out of this dungeons. He looked down at me, giving me a sad smile. I am afraid that I can't. I also believe that as soon as your mother realizes that her hold on us has gotten weak, she'll not hesitate to correct her mistake. I am not sure how for long I will be in my right mind. That's just great. I sighed to myself. What do you think I should do? Go back inside the cell. Who's to say that they won't injure me again, and I don't think you'll be able to get out of her spell every time. No, you can't go back inside. I motioned for him to set me down so I could check if I was able to stand on my own yet. I don't think you'll be able to get far away from here either, though. I suggest you camp somewhere here in the grounds. Do not tell me she might somehow get it out of my head. He supported me before I could face plant on the ground. How far could I go in this condition anyway? It is better to take shelter under the lion's nose, though. Where could I do that was the question. We stayed silent for around 15 minutes. I was concentrating on healing and thinking where I could hide while he was probably wondering when she was going to tighten her hold on him. When I was finally able to walk and run a little, still limping, I decided it was time for us to part. Turning to him, I put my hands on his cheek. I'll make sure to get you and Theo back soon. I promise. Smiling, he put his hand over mine. I'll be holding on to that promise. Just then, his smiling started flickering, and I could see the conflict of emotions in his mind. The witch had started tightening her hold onto him. I knew that it wouldn't take her a lot of time, so I did what I thought was the best for both of us. Somnum, I whispered, caressing his face once and causing him to fall down immediately. This should get him to sleep for a while. The guards would be back soon. Hiding behind one of the pillars, I waited for them. After successfully ambushing them, I exchanged my clothes with the one which I felt would fit me better. I knew that just wearing their clothes wouldn't hide me, so before running out of the door, I masked my scent, making me smell like one of them. I hadn't forgotten that not only humans were a part of this scheme. On opening the door, I was introduced to a never-ending hall. It went both ways, and I could only wonder which path to choose. From one of the end, I could see a group of people coming my way. 2 girls and 3 boys. I will be honest, I was nervous as FK. I didn't know if my magic had even worked. What are you doing here, soldier? One of the boys asked me, and all of them came to a halt in front of me. I could see that all of them were regarding me. Most of them looked at me like I was normal, except for one girl. She narrowed her eyes, taking my appearance in. I am new here, sir. I can't find my way back to the shelter for guards, I replied, trying to sound as civil as I could. I will take you there. The girl, who looked like she would break my facade any time, spoke up, her eyes looking at me coldly. Her voice also sounded as chilly as the look in her eyes. I tried my best not to shiver in the snowstorm created by her. On taking a well-hidden sniff, I could tell that she was human. I wouldn't want to bother you. I assumed that you would have better jobs to do. I smiled at her. No, I don't, she said, turning and motioning for me to follow. I looked at the others, who were clearly as surprised as me, but I knew not to make her wait too much. I couldn't raise any suspicions, though I felt that the girl had already seen through me. We walked in complete silence. It felt like it had been hours when we finally arrived at the barracks. Which room is yours? She turned to face me. I was about to give an excuse, but she cut me off. You haven't been assigned with one yet. Yes, I haven't been assigned with one yet, I replied, nodding my head. The room behind you should do it. I don't think you have a roommate right now, but don't expect it to last for long. She motioned towards the door behind me. Thank you. I was cut off again by sirens that had gone off. I had a feeling I knew why, but decided to ask anyway. What is happening? A prisoner has escaped, she replied, her eyes boring into me. We should go then. We should go catch her, I insisted. I never mentioned that it was a her. She raised an eyebrow. And besides, I don't think we need to go anywhere. Why, I asked, unconsciously leaning against the door behind me. Because I believe that I am already looking at her. 𝐊𝐤 damn who that. Amara I wonder who. Chapter 27. Dedicated to I am Seuss. Quick question, do you think there should be a smut chapter in Lion? If so, till how far would you like it to go? Or do you think Lion is better without it? Amara's POV. OFK. I thought to myself. Don't you have anything to say? She stalked closer to me. I mean, you could try to catch me, I smiled at her. I don't think it would be that difficult. Seeing that you're using most of the magic to heal yourself, she stopped in front of me. I was ready to attack. Get inside the room. To say that I was confused was an understatement. It is the safest place here for now. No one will look for you there, she replied. You are going to help someone who is most definitely going to kill your boss. It was my turn to raise an eyebrow. I don't work under her. She spoke as if she was stating a fact. I scoffed. Well, you are here working with her when you know that she is taking innocent lives. Don't blame me for misunderstanding. I have a tip for you. Don't annoy someone who is trying to help you. You don't know me at all, and you won't. Just get inside before I decide to throw you in front of her. She turned the knob of the door and shoved me in. What's with all the enemies helping me today? I could hear footsteps out of the door. Stasia, have you seen the girl anywhere? She has escaped, someone spoke. No, was all she said. Well, could you help us look for her? What do you think I've been doing? I've searched this side of the barracks. She isn't here, she replied. Are you sure? Would you like to check yourself? My Majesty, I could practically picture her poker face while she spoke. No, of course not. Let us not waste time then. Come on, everyone. Let's go search the grounds. The footsteps retreated. I heard a knock on the door, which was followed by her voice. Farewell, and then silence. I spent around an hour in healing my wounds. By then they were almost completely healed. I sighed, leaning against the bed. I could finally contact them now. Nervousness bubbled in the pit of my stomach. I would finally hear his voice after so long. What should I say? Greetings. It is I. The response was immediate. Amara. Even though he was so far away, I felt as if I could feel his breath in my ear as he spoke. Are you okay, love? His voice was filled with concern. I smiled. I'm all right, 𝐊𝐤𝐳. Did you manage to control the revolt? I promised, didn't I? The council has sent reinforcements to all cities, and the citizens also seem to share the same views as us. I am not wasting time now. I am coming to get you. I could hear the determination in his voice. Do you know where you are? 𝐊𝐤 had told me that you'd be able to find me just by the mind link. Instead of a reply, I got a growl. 𝐊𝐤𝐳, 𝐊𝐤 isn't at fault. You know that he wouldn't do that on purpose either. He has been compelled. I knew that the idiot didn't have enough mind of his own to plan something like that. He replied, causing me to laugh. Amara, your mother is missing. She had gone back to Kronos but never came back. I don't mean to offend you, but I think she is with the enemy. She isn't with the enemy, 𝐊𝐤𝐳, she is the enemy. This time I heard 3 distinct growls. I knew you two were listening in. Why exactly is your mother after you? Damien asked the question that I knew was in all their minds. She is as old as you guys, if not more. She is the witch who cursed you all. She wants to kill us. I replied. She wanted 𝐊𝐤𝐳 to come here sooner, so to bait him she hurt you. 𝐊𝐤𝐳 completed for me. I felt it all. I wanted to come to you, but I couldn't. I'm so sorry for bringing you into this, Amara. It is all my fault. I can't even protect you properly. Shut up. It's not anyone's fault. I would have killed you if you had come here and broken your promise. I mentally slapped his arm, which I'm sure he didn't know had happened. So what's the plan? Rome spoke up this time. Track me and come here. Don't just barge in like you own the place, though. Get some people if you can with you. Ask Kiara to hide your scent and try to kill as less as possible. I don't know how many people have willingly joined and how many have been compelled like 𝐊𝐤. Her magic will die with her. They won't be compelled anymore after her death. I finished. Amara, are you sure you want to kill your mother? I mean, She isn't my mother, Damien. Far from it, actually. No mother would treat their child like she has treated me and the people I love and care about. She certainly isn't doing anyone a favor by living and taking lives. I gritted. I think you should be able to enter easily. Most of them are looking for me right now. But even if we intend to kill her, how will we? The weapon is with her, or have you deciphered where she has kept it? Rome asked. I've deciphered it all right. We don't have to worry about it. It's not with her. I replied. But we all saw you giving the wooden stake to your mother. Did you really think that a simple wooden stake would be a weapon to kill such a big enemy? How is that interesting, Rome? I teased. Then where is it, my moon? Elias inquired. Honestly, I have no idea. All I know is that it is somewhere safe and protected. He will deliver it to us when it is required. Who is he? They all spoke at the same time. A friend, I replied with a smile. Theo, an early update for the lovely people. Chapter 28. Amara's POV. Found you. Elias spoke. Mountains of Ephesus, not that far from the city. It will take us 2 hours max. Good location for a hideout. People are inhibited from going there since they're holy grounds, and with your mother's powers, unnoticeable. These people really need to step up their security. Revolters living right in their holy grounds, pathetic. Rome growled. They couldn't have been totally unnoticeable. Would have to buy their supplies from somewhere. A little bit of magic and fertile land can do a lot of wonders, Rome, I replied. Anyway, I think I'm healed for the most part. I'll head out. You'll need some distraction. Amara, you said they're already distracted as they're looking for you. No need to go out until we reach. We don't know how many enemies we're against. Elias responded. Around 300 on the grounds. How do you know? Damien questioned. I took a sniff. I answered. We are on our way. We'll keep you updated. Stay where you are, Amara, Elias warned. And if I don't? I'll make sure that next time you'll obey even without me telling you, he growled. Never thought that you'd be a sadist. I chuckled. Love, when we are done with this, I'll make sure you know exactly what I can be, he promised. I choked on air. Well, bye, Amara. We'll see you soon. Damien was the one to finally speak up after an awkward silence. While they were making their way to the mountains, I decided that I should retrieve the weapon from a friend, but I had no idea how to. Oh dear moon god, I started. I summon you. Nothing. I pray to you, moon god. Give me the weapon. Nothing. Grace me with your presence, my god. Nothing. Hey, you piece of. I heard you the first time, Amara. A voice came from behind me, startling me and causing me to jump. I turned to see the god lying on the bed with his head lazily resting on one of his arms. Could you try not to give me a heart attack? Every time we meet, I kept a hand over my chest, patting it to calm my heart. You are the one who called me. You should be prepared to see me. It's entirely your fault. His lips twitched upwards. Well, where is it? I asked. Where's what, my dear friend? I'm afraid I can't read your mind. A full smile had now appeared on his face. I damn know well that you can read my mind. Where is the weapon? Ah, hate that. Why? It's safe with me like I promised, of course, he replied. I think it's time you returned it. I need it to end. A certain someone. I crossed my hands. As you say, friend, he held his hand out and closed his eyes. As soon as he opened them back, a dagger appeared on his hand. With the dagger in his hand, he gestured me to come over to him. I obliged and walked over to him, standing beside where he was lying. Out of nowhere, his other arm reached out and grabbed my hand, pulling me onto the bed. He was on top of me at once. My eyes widened at his actions. One of his arm holding both of my hands over my head while his legs were on my thighs, preventing me from kicking his balls. I struggled in his hold but stopped as soon as he brought the knife to my heart. He leaned in, his lips inches away from my ears. Make sure to aim for the heart, he breathed, and I immediately nodded. With that, he was gone, leaving the dagger beside me on the bed. It didn't look like any other, at least not the ones I had seen before in my life. The blade was made of jade, making me wonder how it would pierce through a human. The hilt had a sign of the moon, which was enough to tell that the moon god had been involved in its making. "We are here," a voice spoke in my head once I was gone inspecting the weapon. It was time. I was immediately out of the room and headed for his scent. I knew she would be out as well. After all, she wanted him dead, but she wouldn't let anyone else do it for her. As soon as I opened the door that led out of the barracks, I was welcomed by a knife. Grabbing his hand, I twisted it so that it was at his back and took his knife from him. With the handle of the knife, I hit him on his head hard, causing him to fall down immediately. I would fight the other physically, but I didn't have the time. I had to reach to 𝐊𝐿𝐼𝐺𝐻, so whoever came my way fell unconscious to the ground by a sudden power. I could finally see Elias, Damien, and Rome, but not Kiara. They had turned into their wolves, as had several other enemies and aliases. Elias was baring his teeth at the enemies, challenging them to make a move at him, which some of the unfortunate ones accepted, and were soon lying on the ground, completely unconscious. Bullets were floating in the air, quite literally, which was enough to tell me that Kiara was around. I regarded the surroundings for a second. The ground was covered with mountains on 3 sides, and on the 4th side was a forest. It looked pretty deep. With that, I decided to make my way to Elias, but felt a presence behind me. Before I could turn, he caught my arms, pulling me back against his chest. I tried to use my magic but couldn't, not on him. She was protecting him. "Theo," I growled without looking back. "I don't have time for this." Neither does she. As soon as he spoke, everyone fell down to the ground. Everyone except for Elias, Theo, and I. It was as if they were restrained by an invisible force. Her laughter made its way before her. I could hear the grass move as she walked, but couldn't see her as Theo's grip on me made it impossible for me to turn. She gave me one glance before continuing to walk towards Elias. "How have you been?" She snapped her fingers as she stopped foot away from Elias, causing Elias to turn back into his human and fall on the ground onto his knees. I could see him struggling under her spell. "I've been well," she replied when she heard no response from him. "So tell me, Elias, how would you prefer to die?" "Oh wait," she clasped her hands together like a 5-year-old. "Before you decide how you would like to die, tell me, how should I kill Amara?" To this, Elias responded with a growl and tried to lunge forward but was pulled back immediately, wincing in pain. She fake gasped in surprise. "I'm trying to help you here. You're going to watch her die. You should at least get to decide how she should die." Nothing painless, though. He didn't respond. "Fine, I'll decide it myself." "What a gentleman you are, letting the lady decide. I'll make sure to make your death a little less painful." With that, she put her hands over Elias's head. As soon as her hand made contact with his body, he let out a groan in agony, making me struggle in Theo's hold even more. "But you said you'd give him to me. You said you wouldn't kill him." I rolled my eyes at the voice. My mother turned at her voice, her face scrunching in disgust. Without giving her a second glance, she murmured some words which were followed by a scream and splatter of blood. "Now, does anyone else want to disturb me?" She addressed everyone, but her eyes were looking right at me. "Stay here," she told Elias as if he could move, and made her way towards Theo and I. As she was walking to us, I felt Theo's grip on my hand weaken. He whispered so lightly that only I could hear him. "Get her, Amara. You can use your magic on her. Theo won't bother you. Kiara." "Keep holding her hands," Theo, the evil witch, ordered as she grabbed her neck with one of her hands, but Theo did just the opposite of that, and let my hands go. His hands still stayed in the same position, though, to avoid any suspicion. "Want to kill me, my precious daughter? But how will you when I possess the weapon?" She mocked me as the wooden stake appeared in her other hand. I tried my best to not laugh when I looked at it. "I shall kill you with just the weapon that you intended to kill me with." She brought the stake to my stomach. "Not yet, Amara," I said to myself. Leaning in, she whispered into my ears. "Before I kill you, I should let you know my name so you remember it for eternity, shouldn't I?" "Not yet. Esme." "Now." My movements were too fast for her to comprehend. I grabbed the stake from her, throwing it far away. I landed a punch on her face, causing her to stumble back. Before she could murmur another spell or flick her fingers, I grabbed the dagger that was attached to my belt on the back and grabbed her throat, keeping her at place. I tried to drive the knife through her heart, but it was blocked. She was using a wall. "Be careful, Amara. Let me warn you before you try to kill me. Your magic will die with me, Esme spat. Do you think I give a shit, 𝐊𝐥𝐩𝐡𝐚, I shouted to wherever the witch was hiding. Hold her magic with me. I knew she had heard me because Esme now seemed a lot weaker than before, but not weak enough. I closed my eyes and concentrated my power and mixed it with 𝐊𝐥𝐻𝐻's. When I opened them back, I could see the wall in front of me, withering away. Amara, don't do this, she pleaded in my arms. Don't kill your mother. I need to avenge them before I die, please. Revenge won't get you anywhere, Esme. Look around us. You plan to avenge the dead by killing more people, I spoke as I drove the knife through her heart. She struggled a little but soon fell limp, and her body fell on mine. I could feel the spiritual energy leave my body. It wasn't painful, but it wasn't pleasant either. Gently, I laid the dead witch on the ground. I could tell that everyone was out of their spell. Some seemed dazed while others had a defeated look on their face. I looked over at Elias and saw Rome and Damien helping him up. I was going to help them, but before I could, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around to find Theo looking down at me with a miserable and apologetic face. Guess who finally decided to come around? I smiled, putting my hands on my hips. Amara, I don't even know what to say. I can't do anything to take what I did back, but all I wanted to tell you was that. His voice was cut off, and his eyes widened at the sound of something piercing through the air from behind me. Theo whirled me around, exchanging our positions. Theo, I stuttered as I looked at blood dripping down from his chest. The arrow had pierced right through his heart. Giving me a sad smile, he said, I'm sorry, and then fell down on the ground, his face falling in the direction from where the arrow had been fired, his heartbeat slowing down until it finally faded away completely. Unable to comprehend, I fell down on my knees right beside him, my hand shaking as I touched his wound. Blood covered my hand. The never-ending tears came soon after. Elias, Rome, and Damien were immediately beside us, looking down at their lost friend. With anger seeping into their veins, they made their way into the forest to track the shooter. I caressed his cheek gently. His lifeless eyes were still focused on the forest. Theo, come back. I promise I'll laugh at your stupid jokes. We have so many episodes of so many series to catch up with as well, and I'll call Elias as 𝐿𝐼𝐴S along with you. I won't let him smack you for that. Please just come back, Theo. But there was no response. Sobbing, I pleaded. At least tell me how. How could I have ended it differently? Chapter 29. Amara's POV. It's okay to cry, you know. I spoke as I walked towards Elias, who was sitting on the couch in a black suit, his hands covering his face. I wrapped my arms around Elias's head, to which he in turn wrapped his hands around my waist, his head resting on my stomach. His grip on me became tighter with each tear that fell from his eyes. I kissed the top of his head and rested my chin on top of it. I couldn't help but cry with him. He wasn't supposed to, his voice cracked. He wasn't supposed to die like that. I know, I replied softly, caressing his hair. If only he hadn't covered me. If only I still had my magic powers. If only I had somehow known about the arrow. There were infinite IFS, but it was all too late. I don't mean it like you're thinking, Amara. Don't blame yourself. I will be eternally grateful to him for saving you, but I don't know if I'll ever get to thank him. I don't know if I'll ever get to thank him for everything he has done for me. He sniffled. I can't help but remember my last words to him before he died. They weren't pleasant, Amara. They weren't the words you used to send off a friend. We couldn't even find his killer. What kind of friend am I? Elias, please. You're doing what you asked me not to. Don't blame yourself either. He wouldn't want that I put my palms of his face and brought it up to face me, his teary eyes looking into my equally teary ones. You know that Theo wouldn't want that. There was a knock on the door, causing both of us to turn. It's time, came Damien's voice. I turned back at Elias. He nodded at me and I moved back so that he could stand up. He walked to the door to open it, but he didn't walk out right away, not before taking my hand in his. The sky was covered with dark clouds, making the atmosphere no better than how it already was. He was lying on his casket, wearing a dark blue suit, looking as handsome as he always looked, but the glow and warmth of his skin was replaced by complete coldness. He looked at so much peace, but at the same time as if he was going to wake up at any second, but we all knew that he wouldn't. All of us were standing around him. 𝐊𝐢𝐬, Rome, Damien, Chiara and I, along with some other members of the council who had known him. Everyone spoke of their memories of him, laughing at his silliness, crying because we would never get to see it again. As he was lowered into the ground, rain fell from the sky, making it hard to tell whether the drops of water that fell from our face were tears or the rain. But we did know one thing, that it wasn't just us who were weeping. The heavens were weeping with us. 8 months later. I can't say that the world had become as good as it could be, but it had definitely become a better place for all the species that lived in it. The changes that took place weren't drastic, as it would lead to confusion and chaos, but laws had been amended. Werewolves weren't the rulers anymore, though they still lived in packs with their alphas and other positions. It was necessary for them, it was how they had always lived. The alphas were more like governors now. The system had adopted democracy. The government bodies contained humans, werewolves, and all the hidden species that had come forward. People had learned to live together. Those who despised the other had come to love. It wasn't perfect, but it was a lot better than before. A lot more peaceful. Rome and Damien had come in terms with the fact that they wouldn't have mates a long time ago. According to them, they had found companionship within each other. It was true. They didn't need a mate bond to tell them to love each other, and neither did 𝐊𝐢𝐬 and I. Not anymore. Every Sunday, all 4 of us would pack the breakfast and visit Theo's grave. We would talk, laugh, cry, and eat with him. We would share our experience of the week, tell him secrets that we couldn't tell each other. That Sunday was no different. We were all sitting on the mat that lay on the ground, facing his grace. 𝐊𝐢𝐬 was next to me, his arm wrapped around my shoulder, while Damien was feeding Rome fruits with a fork as he was too occupied in reading. It's been a long time. A familiar voice made us all turn back to look at him. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "That's not how you greet a friend, Amara." The god clicked his tongue. I had met the god the day after we had buried Theo. I had begged him for a favor to bring him back. Deep down I knew it wasn't possible. Yet I couldn't help but have some hope. He was a god after all. He outright denied. I expected it, but couldn't help but feel disappointed. It wasn't his fault either, but now that I saw him again, those feelings came back. I tried to slap them away, but I couldn't. "My dear Amara, I have told you before. I can't bring your friend back. I do not interfere with what fate has in mind. Even I am not in position to do that." He smiled. His smile was what made it worse. How could he smile when we were clearly feeling loss? "I know," I replied. "I'm sorry. I know I'm being unreasonable. It's not your fault. You can't blame me for questioning your sudden arrival, though. You don't really visit unless you have something to say." "Of course. My friend knows me well." His smile widened. "Being the ideal friend I am here to give you some advice." "And what might that be?" 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐬 was the one to speak this time. "Ishan, what was it again?" He brought one of his hands to his chin and tapped it, clearly pretending to be in deep thought. "Are you really going to play with us like that?" I sighed. All right. He straightened his posture and his face suddenly became grim, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Help him. He has been through a lot." He was speaking in riddles again. Before we could ask who, he just vanished into thin air, leaving us with our thoughts. These thoughts didn't last too long, as our heads snapped towards the grave, all of us standing up, alert, when we heard pounding from the ground, not from above it, but from below. I know for a fact that our eyes widened and our hearts skipped a beat in sync when we saw a hand emerge from under the ground. Chapter 30. Amara's POV. To say that we were taken aback would be an understatement. After all, it's not every day that you see your supposedly dead best friend rise from his grave and stand in front of you in the very blue suit that you buried him in. The fact that his eyes had a fire in them didn't help either. Just not figuratively, literally as well. The eyeballs were fully black with flames of hellish fire dwelling in them, his face still as expressionless as it was when he laid in his coffin. But there were changes in his features. There was a certain roughness, but at the same time sharpness in his looks. He looked more primal than human. Theo, there was a certain cautiousness when 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐬 called out his name. Theo's eyes narrowed ever so slightly as he angled his face to get a better look at 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐬. "𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐬, is that you?" His voice came out as a whisper, as expression turned into that of confusion. He then looked at Rome, Damien, and then me. He continued to look around at the world as if he could not believe that he was back. Well, who would? Is that what he meant? If it was not for our heightened hearing, we wouldn't have caught those words. They left his mouth as if they were spoken to only reach his ears. The flames inside his eyes were burning even brighter now, as if displaying his anger and confusion. Instinctively, we all stepped back. It didn't go unnoticed by him. "You're scared of me?" he asked, looking directly at me, his voice dripping with sorrow. Elias was the first one to walk up to him. He smacked Theo's head. Never in 100 years, he then proceeded to laugh at his own joke. Walking to him, I spoke. "Scared of you," I scoffed. "No offense, Theo, but I could easily beat you up." When I was finally in front of him, I gave him a toothy grin, to which he replied with the curving of his lips into a small smile. We had practically surrounded Theo by the time Rome and Damien were at his side. "So what's up with your eyes?" Rome was the one to ask the question we all had in our minds. "What's up with my eyes?" Theo repeated after him, raising one of his eyebrows. "There's fire in your eyes," Damien stated, which seemed to confuse Theo even further. I went to fetch my bag and pulled out a small mirror, which I then handed to him. He angled it so that he could have a clear view of his eyes. When he saw them, his hands shook slightly. I couldn't tell whether it was because of anger or fear. His mouth curved up into a snarl as he looked at his reflection, barring his canines. They seemed to have elongated more than one could imagine. So this was his parting gift. The anger in his voice was evident. Who did this to you, Theo?" I questioned. "The devil." It was difficult to believe what Theo had enlightened us with that day. Even though I was his friend, it would be ridiculous to think that if heaven or hell existed, which I was now certain of that it did, that Theo would be the one to go to heaven. Hell? I don't think that I'd be allowed there either. And that was what had exactly happened. Theo had been through hell, again literally. The word I had used to describe the flames in his eyes, hellish, had been accurate. They were the flames of hell. So it was confirmed that hell had flames, but they weren't exactly using it to punish the sinners by frying them for eternity. For punishment, they made the sinners go through the lives of each of their victims. The sinners would forget who they were and fully immerse into those lives, reliving through whatever their victims had been through. Their happiness, sorrow, regret, and the pain that they had inflicted upon them, and the results of their actions. That is what happened for an eternity. The devil, or whatever you may call him, was a master manipulator of minds. He was the one who bore the responsibility to deliver the punishments. He would, every once in a while, appear in the visions of the sinners. This would make the sinners go crazy, as they would get reminded of what was going to happen. They would get reminded that they were not really living, that the body they thought was theirs certainly wasn't. According to Theo, the devil had taken a certain liking, if you must say, towards him. It was because Theo would tell that he was in a state of illusion. He hadn't gone insane like all of the others. That made the devil notice him more. It made him interested in playing mind games with Theo. Theo never told us what they were about. Before coming back to the world of the living, Theo had met him. The devil had told him that they would meet again and parted with him, but not before informing him that he had a gift for him as a reminder of the promise. We all were now sure of what it was. Theo hadn't been the same. He would still smile and joke around with us a little, but he had become distant. He sometimes wouldn't talk for several days and stayed locked up in his room. He wouldn't tolerate strangers at all. Even when the ladies hit on him, he would just let out a low warning growl. I couldn't see him like that. I knew that if he was in my place, he would rush into my room and smack the hell out of my head. I did barge into his room during one of his hibernations, but didn't smack his head. I admit I was a little intimidated of him. He was sitting at the window, staring at the distant view. Even on my dramatic entrance, he didn't whip his head to look at me. I could almost hear the conflict in your mind to enter the room. Amara, he spoke as he traced a drop of water that was dripping down the window due to the rain outside. What's wrong? Theo, I almost slapped myself for asking him that. The man's been through hell and you're asking him what's wrong. Let me rephrase it, No, I really can't rephrase it. He chuckled. It's not the living through hell part that is eating me alive. Then what is, I asked, hoping to be able to somehow find a solution to what the problem. Technically I died, came his reply. It should have created some loophole. A loophole, I repeated. A loophole in what? In the nature, in magic. The curse ended when I died. Do you mean to say? The fire in his eyes brightened as he spoke. I might have a mate out there. Epilogue. Surprised, elated, hopeful. These are a few words that can be described to explain the emotions swirling through the group when Amara informed the others about the good news. Amara had always wanted to travel, and now she would. The wolves had promised 𝐊𝐤 that they would go around the world looking for his mate, just like he had accompanied 𝐿𝐼𝐼𝐼 in his search for Amara. That night, they all huddled into a hug to bind their promise. Their journey would begin in the heat of summer and end ... Well, that was something no one could guess. But all of that was months away. For now, they were all sitting on the top of the mountain, the place 𝐿𝐼𝐼𝐼 and Amara frequently visited to watch the sunset, the only difference being that this time they weren't alone. Damien sat beside Rome, his head laying on top of his shoulder. 𝐊𝐤 watched the flames of the sun drown into the sky, which only seemed to ignite the flames of his eyes even more. Amara sat on 𝐿𝐼𝐼𝐼's lap, her head resting on his chest and his arms wrapped around her waist, holding her close. You could say that it was one of the happy moments in their lives. Happy but ignorant. Ignorant of what lay ahead of them. Ignorant of the fact that their lives were just a few months away from a whirlpool that could cause an everlasting disaster. After all, it wasn't the end yet.